Providing the summit's tech keynote, we have Deb Noller, Chief Executive Officer of Switch Automation. Deb will make a case for the improvement of energy efficiency and reduction of carbon footprint via meaningful data and how the industry can switch to new operational models through digital transformation.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to talk to you today about how to use technology and meaningful data to create a more energy efficient portfolio of buildings and to reduce your carbon footprint. My name's Deb Noller and I'm the CEO of Switch Automation. I believe that our industry, the world of smart and connected and digital buildings, is actually going to be one of the most exciting industries to be involved in over the next 4 or 5 years, because it's about to have some explosive growth. And that growth is actually driven by quite a number of large megatrends that are all coming at once. So the first megatrend is we've seen more than 2 years worth of digital transformation occurring in the first 2 months of this year, as COVID really started to bite into big companies and how they had to all move their organizations into lockdowns or work from home. But this actually was already a megatrend anyway, because consumers have adopted technology in droves for the last 10 or 20 years. We've picked up smartphones and tablets and we've adopted apps and we've moved ourselves into the digital world. But by and large, the enterprise has been way behind the consumer. And most CEOs are well aware of that, and they go to bed at night really wondering how they're going to keep their companies relevant. And they're really worried about, the next 5 years and how their company can digitize and still retain its relevance in 5 years' time, as companies all around them are innovating and creating a digital version of themselves. So this was already a bit of a catch-up game for enterprise as they kind of caught up with consumers. And what COVID did was it actually just highlighted quite in a quite stark way just how far behind the enterprise was. And so all through 2020, what you've seen is a vast amount of catch-up. But what it actually has done is accelerate an existing trend. And this is a trend that also applies to smart buildings. So what we've seen is that companies that have large workforce who are technical in the facilities management area realize that they have these teams of people that are of a certain age. They're going to be retiring over the next 5 or 10 years. And that they have skills that are not necessarily present in the next generation of workers. So this is a group of people who grew up with a certain set of equipment that was quite technical, but also manual, not digital and technical, and that the skills is not really in that team for the future. And so the more forward-thinking companies have started to think about what they're going to do to transition or digitize that FM team. So we've actually seen companies who are centralizing their teams, upskilling for smart building technologies, and bringing those skills back into a central or a national team and managing those buildings. So that's something that's really interesting and a bit of a trend where we're going to see digital FM become a big part of our landscape over the next 5 or 10 years. So here's a company that we've been working with. They're based in North America. They have more than 17 buildings on our platform. They took a view that they currently have 200 buildings. Each building has a facilities manager. They wanted to bring that program back in-house. They wanted to apply analytics, but do it at a centralized, from a centralized location, and to manage those from a centralized location. And one of the big driving incentives for them was to become a landlord of choice. And by that, the first thing that they really wanted to attack was the number of hot cold calls coming out of their building network. So they had already identified that about 25% of all of the complaints coming out of their buildings from their Class A premium tenants were I'm too hot or I'm too cold. And what they realized was that they didn't want their clients to be the first people to notice this. They didn't want their clients to have to kick off the workflow to rectify that. They really wanted to be a landlord of choice in that they would be the first to know about those hot cold spaces. They would be able to get on the front foot around the management of that. They would be able to proactively advise their clients. One of the side effects of them implementing the fault detection and analytics across their portfolio is they've actually had significant equipment performance upgrades, but also a lot of energy savings. So that client across their 17 buildings is now saving more than $1 million a year, and they are continuing to expand that portfolio rollout. The next big mega trend is one that we're all incredibly familiar with, particularly in the last year as we've seen event after event. And I'm from Australia, so we saw the bushfires last November, December, January, which were quite devastating, and that is climate change. So climate change has been around since the 70s. The insurance companies were already factoring this in from 1980. It was only in the 90s that we saw concerted lobby groups get together to create the whole climate denial conversation and slow that down. But we now have a situation where it's not just climate change, it's not even climate emergency, it's actually fast becoming a climate crisis. So we've already seen how that affects the real estate industry, and there's been multiple crises have already hit the real estate industry over the last 10 years. These are devastating, both from impacting the operations of real estate, but also very costly around reopening the doors when you've had a massive hurricane or a typhoon or flooding or fire. But also ongoing expense in increasing risk aversion and insurance claims. So we believe that this is a new normal, and that the climate crisis is actually going to continue to unleash many climate-related events, and we're actually going to all have to learn how to manage in a crisis as part of our new normal. So here's a case study of a company that got ahead of climate change. So they own an iconic building in New York City. That building was undergoing a 1 in 100 year equipment upgrade. So this building is it's almost 100 years old, and it was undergoing a once in a century upgrade of critical equipment. And often what you'll see when that type of upgrade happens is that the building owners and operators will replace like for like. So they'll just replace the same elevators with a new updated elevators or a new updated BMS, for example. But this particular company decided that they would partner with the Clinton Climate Initiative, and they would take this incredibly expensive upgrade and step back and think about how they could do things differently and really in an innovative way bring some lasting change and some lasting impact to that building. So they did a few different things. One of the things that they had was access to enough data to know that no one single thing was going to actually achieve a huge number of results for them. So no one program that they implemented in this building actually got them more than 8% of energy savings. So the first thing they did was they replaced all of the lighting with LED lighting. So that was actually a very obvious change, and it's very obvious because the LED lighting on this building changes with programming and controls. So they're able to light that building up for 4th of July or for a sporting event or for Earth Hour, and they can change the theme, they can change the colors. and it's a very obvious program that they implemented, and anybody all over New York can see what they did. But they didn't stop there. They actually did some other highly innovative things. So one of the things that they did was they looked at the elevators, the 73 elevators in that building, and they analyzed those elevators, and using some highly innovative technology, they were able to introduce regenerative braking, which means that they were able to capture all of the energy from the descending elevators and put that into the ascending elevators. So not only did they make the elevators completely energy neutral, but they were actually able to make those elevators generate energy for the building. So that was the second thing they did. And then the third thing they did was that they changed all of the glazing in that building. So buildings use 30% of the world's energy. Half of that goes into heating and cooling. So 15% of the world's energy goes into heating and cooling. And we know just from data and analytics and looking at the portfolios that we manage that you can save at least 30% of that without having any impact whatsoever on the comfort or the operations of a building. So that's 6 to 8% of the world's energy can be saved just by paying attention. So this particular building and portfolio, they identified that if they changed the glazing and made the glazing much more energy efficient, they could save on both heating in the winter and cooling in the summer. So they took every single window out of this building, more than 4,000 windows, and they created a manufacturing plant on site, and they double glazed those windows. So they reused the existing windows, so very sustainable in terms of the cyclical cradle to grave nature of what they did. But they also made the increase the thermal efficiency of the building by putting double glazing in. So that particular building was able to save over $4 million a year in energy savings, but they were also really keen to introduce some innovative techniques around air quality and air purification. And didn't that turn out to be a handy thing to have already done in 2020? So they introduced some highly innovative air purification and filtration systems, which means that they've got a much higher quality of indoor air than any other building in New York. And they have actually been able to be the first well-certified portfolio globally. So what that did was not only save money on the bottom line, which meant that they were obviously more profitable, but it also meant that they could attract a much higher class of tenant and much bigger tenants. So instead of having lots and lots of small tenants, they now have just a few really high quality tech clients who really care about the health and well-being of their workforce. So incredibly innovative, and you couldn't have done any of that without having access to great data to be able to see what was the impact of each of those programs, and also data that you can share with your tenants. The third mega trend is regulation, and the reason that this is so important and such a growth area of our economy is most of our cities are getting to close to capacity in terms of the amount of energy that they generate for the city to function. And if the city is going to grow, they're going to have to do one of two things. They're going to have to build new power stations, or they're going to have to work out how to achieve more with the energy that they already have. So there isn't a politician alive who wants to put their name to a new power station. So, and there are lots of studies that have determined that most cities can actually get the next 50 years of growth just by being more efficient with the energy that they already have. However, the incentives are not great for aligning landlords and tenants and improving the energy efficiency of buildings. And what I mean by that is all around the world, there are many, many leases where if the landlord spends the money and upgrades the building, the tenants actually get the benefit of the energy reductions. And so because the incentives are not right, it means that the landlords don't necessarily act, and so they wait until the leases turn over. And so there are cities all around the world that are working out how can they align the incentives to make these buildings go a bit faster in terms of their energy upgrades so that we all have enough energy for the city's growth. So one of the things that New York City did was introduced Local Law 97, which is a incredibly ambitious target to have all of their buildings at 80% energy efficient by the year 2050. So what they've done is they've said buildings need to be 40% energy efficient by 2030 and 80% energy efficient by 2050, but we want to see the landlords starting to act now. And so what we're doing is introducing fines that will start in 2024. So that's really aligning the incentives with the landlords to give them the incentive to upgrade those buildings, because otherwise the fines are really going to start to bite. And those fines are hefty. They can be up to $2 million per year per building. So just turning now to Australia, who's had regulation in there around energy and mandatory disclosure on carbon emissions since 2010. So what you've seen in Australia is lots of buildings have upgraded in order to get their buildings from a 4.5 star to a 5 star, or from a 5 to a 5.5 star. And the way the incentives worked there was, it was actually market driven, because a lot of the big tenants like the government and the large majors like the banks or the big corporates would only rent or take leases in buildings that had at least a 5-star rating. And so all the landlords had the incentives then to go ahead and make those upgrades. But what most of the landlords did was pick the low-hanging fruit. So they moved a lot of their buildings to renewable or green energy, carbon credits, and LED upgrades. But we're now starting to see the second wave. So, they've gone through that first wave of the easy to fix things, and now we're starting to see landlords really attacking the next wave of innovation. And to do that, you need data, you need analytics, and you need the tools to be able to dig into building performance to really understand how to make those buildings more efficient. So there is a company that we're working with in Australia. They have more than 40 large buildings across nationally, so shopping centres and commercial A-grade real estate. What they did was they worked with us to develop a product which we called DX Cubed. That product actually does a digital readiness assessment of the building. So we were able to deploy that over June, July, August of this year, and we were able to assess that out of their 45 buildings, they had 38 buildings that were already digital ready. And what we were able to do then was to turn on the data ingestion and the analytics to get those buildings to start using that data to implement a data-driven a HVAC maintenance system. So instead of being completely reactive, this company is using data and actually implementing an entire program around their HVAC maintenance that will be data-driven. So really great, innovative thinking, driven by some really smart, technical, younger people who've been given the power of authority over that portfolio, and we're really looking forward to seeing what results they get over 2021. The fourth mega trend, and this is huge, is that because of what's happened to our global economies through 2020, every economy globally, and nobody has been left out of the party on this one, is every economy has been smashed by COVID. And so governments have up until now just been pouring stimulus into all of the economies to keep the spending going and to protect the jobs. But what governments all around the world are looking at now is how do they take the next round of stimulus money and pour that into the economy in a way that will actually stimulate the economy and create jobs. So one of the most, and we're seeing these kinds of programs popping up everywhere. So we saw one today that was announced in Melbourne, $1 billion of money in Victoria, Australia, going into a smarter, greener economy, addressing climate change, specifically addressing buildings. Part of it is specifically addressing buildings and addressing energy. And Joe Biden has $2 trillion coming into the economy for a greener, cleaner energy and economy. And all of these programs will absolutely create a lot of jobs. So we believe that this is going to drive a lot of growth through 2021. We're really excited about that, and it will lead to data-driven sustainability programs as well. The fifth big mega trend is generational change, and by that I mean we've got the baby boomers retiring. We've got Gen X, Gen Y and Gen Z coming through the ranks and starting to take management roles with companies. And those people are just not going to tolerate the way that we've been managing buildings over the past 20 years, which is by and large without data. If you look at the way people manage large portfolios of buildings in the past, it's been on spreadsheets and it's without access to granular data, and a lot of it has been manual or even though it's technical, it's manually led rather than digitally led. So we believe that the next 3 or 4 years, as we start to see more and more of the next generation come into the industry, we're going to see a huge change in the way that organizations are managed, and the expectation that roles will be supported by digital tools and by data and analytics. So the big challenge, of course, is large companies that do have portfolios of multi-million-dollar assets of real estate often have incredibly skilled teams, but skilled in a way that doesn't necessarily support a transformational change to a digital world. So we have, asset managers and property managers and sustainability people, but they don't necessarily have the skills or the confidence around technology to lead their organization on this large transformative change. So that's one of the big challenges facing a lot of companies, and we were funded this year by a real estate company, Gore Capital, who are headquartered out of Hong Kong. And looking at what they did was quite interesting. So they recognized that they didn't have anybody on their team who was a technology expert amongst real estate. So they actually looked outside their organization and hired a gentleman called Bill Lee. Bill was the head of real estate for Microsoft. He is a real estate guy. He understands the real estate transactions inside out, but he's also incredibly confident around technology, assessing technology and buying technology, and he's not afraid to take that big leap of faith into taking their organization on that journey. So here's what he did, and this is a bit of a lesson in digital leadership. The first thing he did was he created a really big, bold, brave plan for the organization, and he conveyed that plan and that vision to the entire team. So he was able to bring everybody along with him because he got everybody excited about this plan, and he was able to sort of sell that idea and get everybody to come along. What Gore did was they gave him not only the autonomy to go ahead with that plan, but they also gave him the political clout to be able to bring everybody along with him. So something really important there. The next thing that Bill did was he would recommend this to everybody. Start with what you already have. Everybody already has systems in buildings that are digital ready, whether they're building management systems or lighting systems or metering devices or access control, or even just systems that are collecting data like meeting room booking systems or work order systems or help desk ticketing. Start with what you've already got. There's no real need to go out there and spend tens of thousands of dollars implementing the latest IoT sensors when you're not really taking advantage of the data that you already have. And then the third thing is you have to create, and this is difficult for real estate organizations, you have to create an organization that has a different appetite for risk. Innovation means success, and ultimately sometimes you have failures, and that's okay, because you can't innovate without some element of success and failure. And so you actually have to create an environment where it's all right to have a few things that didn't work out. What you do is you don't beat somebody up because they had a failure. You actually bring everybody to the table and you celebrate that failure by learning what can you learn from that to make sure that we go forward, we don't do that again, and we learn something really interesting and valuable out of that. So it's about staying keen with the team, checking back in, celebrating the successes, but also recognizing and celebrating the failures to some extent. And this is just a few tips for what we think you can do also, besides hiring somebody who can lead you on that organizational change, coming up with that plan, using what you've already got, staying keen and involved. There's some other things that everybody can do, which is you can't hire enough engineers and data scientists to do the job that has to be done to digitize your buildings over the next 3, 4, 5 years. You're going to need technology too, so you're going to have to really be able to learn how to assess technology, what scales, learn about data governance and data compliance and data hosting, data ownership. There's a whole raft of things to learn around that, cybersecurity, networking, data normalization. There's a lot of things to learn, but then there's companies out there like us who are more than happy to help you on that journey. We don't charge consulting. We happily help be part of the education, and there's a lot of information at the conferences and online that you can dig into. But really, everybody's going to have to think about how they digitize now to protect against future threats. And the reason for this is because your competitors will be digitizing now, and what will come out of that is new revenue models, and so they'll be more competitive both in terms of their costs and their profitability, but they'll also come to market with new revenue models. The good thing is that we're going to positively impact the planet by digitizing these assets, and we're going to create a whole generation of smart digital jobs and fight climate change at the same time. So doing that, we have to seek out ways to increase the digital skills for all of our teams. They have to be better at digital, and there's a lot of learning to be done there. But as I said, there's a lot of resources, and there's courses now for specifically around smart building knowledge. So that's a great thing. One of the greatest things about this, apart from the fact that you're going to digitize your assets, become more profitable, create new revenue models, increase the skills of your team. One of the really positive impacts out of all of this is the fact that because we're moving into a digital world, it actually is a great opportunity to open up our industry and really increase the diversity in our industry. So that's actually one of the really positive outcomes that people probably didn't expect to see. If you look at our industry, it has been by and large very much male. If you were in North America, it would be male and white. Obviously in Asia it's different, but it's very much a male dominated industry. And what we're seeing, because the industry is opening up to more digital skills, that actually opens up opportunity to have a much more diverse workforce. So particularly we're seeing a lot more women coming into the industry. We're seeing a lot more people of colour coming into the industry. We're seeing other aspects of diversity being addressed. And that actually makes for a really healthy, prosperous workforce and organisation. So it's I'm going to just leave you with that as a takeaway, that there's lots of really positive reasons to implement technology and smart data and meaningful data and tech driven analytics into your organisation, impacting the planet, saving money, creating new business models, and increasing the diversity of your teams. So thank you so much for having me, and as always, happy to answer any questions. Our contact details are on the screen. You can contact myself or any of our team at any time. We love having conversations, meaningful conversations with the industry. Thank you very much. Bye.